In this world, healers are divided into two categories, first class and third class. But beyond the system, there exists one extraordinary healer, unlicensed, unmatched, and operating from the shadows. Surrounded by women and cloaked in mystery, he's always prepared to heal and to do whatever it takes, as long as you're willing to pay his price. The story begins with a girl named Lily gently waking up our protagonist Xenos, and while he's still rubbing the sleep out of his eyes, she's already in the kitchen brewing tea like it's their morning routine. We then quickly learn that in this world, a first-rate healer isn't just someone who mends wounds. There's someone with the power to reshape the world itself. In the kingdom of Herzith, healers play a key role in the country's rise, their influence so great that they helped write the very history of the nation. Healers are deeply respected, having earned their status through decades of advancing the kingdom's reach. Most of them gather at the Royal Medical Institute to study, master complex healing magic, and earn their licenses before officially beginning their careers. But not all of them follow the traditional path. Somewhere in this kingdom, there's one healer who has no degree, no formal training, and no license, and that's Xenos. We then jump to a scene where Xenos is finishing up with a patient. After the treatment, the man pays and thanks him sincerely. Xenos just shrugs it off, telling him that as long as they can afford the price, he'll heal anyone. Once the man leaves, Lily asks if he's heading out for house calls today. Xenos confirms that he is, but promises to be back by nightfall. Lily smiles and tells him she'll have dinner ready when he gets home. Xenos heads out, and the moment the door closes, she turns her focus to preparing the evening meal. While Lily is still in the middle of cooking, Carmilla drops by to check on her. Lily apologizes, saying the food isn't quite ready yet, and Carmilla leans in to check what's cooking, and it turns out it's stew. Carmilla is already looking forward to dinner, but Lily tells her not to worry, she's got this handled. After all, she is Xenos' future bride. Hearing that, Carmilla backs off with a lazy grin and decides to head to her room and slack off. Not long after, Zafia shows up at the clinic looking for Xenos. Lily lets her know he's out on house calls, so Zafia decides to wait anyway. But she's shy because she came early, hoping to catch some time alone with him. But she wasn't the only one who thought about this, because Linga soon arrives too, looking for Xenos. Lily gives her the same answer, and Linga pouts, clearly disappointed because she was planning to rub her tail on Xenos and smother him with affection. Zafia suggests she head back home since she's already here waiting, but Linga is not giving up that easily, and she'll wait too. Their rivalry starts to heat up, but Lily interrupts them both. Calm but firm, she reminds them it's her job to wait for Xenos, not theirs. Then right on cue, Lil crashes the door open like she owns the damn place and says that she's here to have some fun with Xenos. Lily also gives her the usual update, but tells her to fix the door she broke first before she enters. Lou does, and once she steps inside, she is surprised to see everyone already gathered. She looks around and jokes that maybe it was Lily's cooking that pulled them all in. But the others shoot that idea down quick, and they make it clear that she's the only one who'd show up for food. Later, we see that Lily is near the end of her cooking, and with a small smile, she adds her secret herb mix into the stew. She then turned to the others and told them they'd all wait for Xenos before starting dinner, inviting them to join in as well. They agreed without hesitation, and Lily looked forward to eating together, but just before taking a seat, she headed out to grab the laundry drying outside, leaving the others with the smell of stew lingering in the air. It was driving them crazy. Lou and Linga exchanged one look, that kind of look that said, just a taste won't hurt, and within seconds, they were in the kitchen, spoons in hand. The second they tasted it, their self-control vanished. They kept saying they were just tasting and not really eating, but even Zafia could see they were lying through their teeth. She warned them that Lily was going to destroy them if she found out, but after one whiff of that stew, even she couldn't hold back. Outside, Lily was humming quietly, folding laundry under the afternoon sun, completely unaware of the culinary crime scene unfolding in her kitchen. Then we see that the girls realize that the stew has been entirely devoured, so they start blaming one another for finishing it all, and in a moment of panic, they decide to pretend they don't remember what happened. Realizing that denial won't solve the problem, they agree to make another meal instead. Zafia suggests they start fresh by adding new ingredients to the pot, but right then, Lily walks in and catches them mid-whisper, hovering around the pot like a bunch of thieves. Cut to the dinner table, and the girls sat there stiff as statues. Lily didn't yell. She didn't have to. Her glare did all the talking. When she calmly asked what happened, they crumbled fast. One blamed the smell, another said her hands moved on their own, and they all started bickering again. Seeing this shit show, Lily grows upset and warns them that if they continue to bicker, Xenos will be furious. She laments that she wanted to enjoy a meal with Xenos and the rest of them in peace, and the girls quickly apologize, promising to help her with the cooking. But Lily then reveals that she prepared only enough ingredients for tonight. Just then, Carmilla storms in furious that they consumed all of her stew. Linga immediately apologizes and the others quickly follow suit. Carmilla demands to know how they plan to make amends, half-jokingly suggesting she might have to devour their souls in retribution. Lily intervenes, insisting that they bring her the missing ingredients, and the group hastily agrees, dispersing to gather them. After that whole mess, Lily realizes with a sigh that she's also just used the last of her secret ingredient. Carmilla, still lingering nearby, raises a brow and asks if she's not mad at the others for eating everything. Lily shrugs it off, saying she's not that angry, and Carmilla just stares at her like she's some kind of saint. Carmilla even adds that if they had devoured not just her stew but also her wine, she might have cursed them. Lily just laughs nervously, not entirely sure if Carmilla's joking, but then her mind wanders if she'll even be able to cook dinner again before Xenos returns. Meanwhile, over in town, Xenos is walking through the streets when he spots a demi-human girl clutching her stomach in pain. Soon her master appears and reveals that she is his slave. He demands to know where she ran off to, and she explains that she suffered from a stomach hack and went to a clinic for help, but they turned her away because she lacked the money to pay for treatment. Enraged that she prioritized her own comfort over work, her master drags her away like she's a broken tool instead of a person. Xenos keeps watching as the man drags her all the way to a graveyard and literally throws her onto the ground like garbage. He mocks her, says this kind of dirty place suits a demi-human like her, clearly not seeing the spirit is cruelty just awakened. He kicks her in the stomach again, demanding she get up and start digging graves, but she doesn't even have the strength to respond. Still, he ignores her pain and tells her if she wants to eat, she better dig up something valuable. Then he turns around to leave, leaving her lying there in the dirt. But before he can make it far, she snaps. Possessed by a spirit, the girl suddenly lashes out, slashing at him hard enough to draw blood, so now he's the one panicking. He stumbles backward and runs straight into Xenos, begging for help and saying his slave just went crazy. But Xenos doesn't even blink and tells the man to step aside and listens as the man points at his slave. Seeing her, Xenos calmly asks what exactly he did to her. The guy explains that he merely told her to resume her work, and when Xenos asks about the work, the man starts deflecting, lies about it, and says that it is just some farm work. He then flips the script, whining about being injured and needing medical help, and he even offers Xenos money if he'll stop the girl. The possessed slave then launches an attack on the master, but Xenos intervenes to protect him. He questions the slave, asking why she's so angry. In response, she hurls stones at him, which he deftly dodges. Impressed by his agility, the noble urges Xenos to kill the slave, but Xenos refuses, insisting that his duty as a healer is to preserve life. The noble admits he's a man of high status and warns that if this chaos continues, he will eventually meet his end, and he plans to buy a new slave if she dies anyway. Undeterred, Xenos vows that he will save every life he can, firmly committed to his calling as a healer. The slave then lunges at him, hurling a large boulder, but Xenos, drawing on some mysterious enhancement, shatters it with his bare hands. The noble, watching in disbelief, wonders what kind of healer could possess such strength. The slave immediately resumes her attack with lightning speed, making Xenos doubt that she's just any ordinary demi-human. She slashes at him with her claws, but he manages to fend her off with a protective barrier, only to notice that the force of the blows has left her badly injured. Despite her wounds, the slave keeps moving, her every motion fueled by pure, unbridled hatred, and it dawns on him that she must be possessed. Moving closer, Xenos braces himself as she sinks her teeth into him. In that surreal moment, he's startled by the thought that ghosts can not only possess, but even engage in casual banter, or at least that seems to be the case. Determined, he channels his healing magic to mend her injuries while simultaneously exorcising the malevolent spirit that has taken hold of her. As he works, he can't help but wonder what kind of farm work would lead someone to be so vulnerable to ghostly possession. Once the exorcism is complete, he mutters that he's done for the day. The noble is taken aback when he sees that Xenos has easily healed the slave's crushed foot. Desperate, he begs Xenos to save him too, reminding Xenos that he is a healer. Xenos calmly replies that his work for the day is done and that he'll have to do it tomorrow, to which the noble retorts that by then he'd already be dead. Undeterred, the noble insists on immediate treatment, and Xenos warns him that the price will be steep. The noble scrambles through all the money he has on hand, insisting it should be enough, but Xenos shakes his head and says it's not. The noble rumbles that the fee is already higher than market price, adding that he won't go unscathed if Xenos charges illegally, but Xenos tells him that he's an unlicensed healer. The noble is taken aback to learn such healers exist, and Xenos dryly comments that it's a shady business, much like grave robbing. The noble tries to play dumb, but Xenos sees right through him and declares that the remainder of the fee will come in the form of the slave's documents. The noble seems indifferent and accepts this deal, then departs after being healed. After the noble leaves, the slave slowly awakens. She's startled to see Xenos hovering over her, and her stomach still churns with pain. She asks him who he is, and he bluntly reveals that he is Xenos and that he just bought her. He then asks for her name, and she murmurs that it's Tilly. Xenos orders her to remove her clothes, explaining that he spent a lot of money on her and needs to check her physical condition thoroughly. Tilly hesitates for a moment, but understanding she has no choice, so she complies. As Xenos examines her, he notices that her bile duct is blocked with gallstones and severely inflamed. Xenos then reveals that he had suspected this, and he also observed that she has symptoms of jaundice, so he followed her. He heals her in seconds, and she asks him what he just did. Calm as ever, he replied that he'd opened up her abdomen, removed the gallstones, and closed it back up. She's shocked because there is no chanting, no magic sigils, and somehow no scar at all. He acted like it was no big deal, saying any healer could pull it off. But she didn't let that slide and told him straight that no, they absolutely couldn't. Tilly then thanked him from the heart, still unsure how she could possibly make it up to him. That's when he mentioned he had a task for her. She didn't even hesitate and told him she was ready to do whatever it takes to return the favor. So he handed her a drawing of a herb and asked if she could locate it. She said she could, told him to come along, and not long after, we see her finding the exact herb for him. It turns out to be the same one Lily had used earlier in her cooking. He thanked her for it, but she brushed it off, saying it was easy, and honestly she'd thought he was going to ask for something completely different. Xenos then told her that her part was done, but she didn't feel like it was nearly enough. He disagreed, telling her that as a rule, he only takes compensation that matches the effort he gives. She still didn't think she'd done anything worth that kind of help, but he told her the truth. It may seem small, but it's something he couldn't have done without her. Then without waiting, he tore up her contract and told her she was free to choose her own path now. She admitted she didn't know what that path was yet, but she would figure it out, and when she did, she'd come back and let him know. He didn't mind and wished her well and told her to come find him again if she ever got hurt. Later that night, he returned home. Lily greeted him, telling him dinner wasn't ready yet. Right then, the three food thieves came back from gathering ingredients, and he couldn't help but wonder why they were even here. They kept their mouths shut about having already eaten his share, and Lily decided to whip up something new. Xenos stepped into another room, and the moment Carmilla caught sight of him, she smirked because she could tell something was different, like she could literally smell another woman on him. He shot her a look and told her to shut it. Lily then asks him to wait while she prepares dinner, but he stops her, and she catches on quickly because what he really wants is some black tea, and she tells him that she'd go make it right away. We then flash back and learn that Xenos used to be part of a top-tier adventuring party called Golden Phoenix, but everything changed when their so-called leader, Aston, shoved a gold coin at him like he was tossing scraps to a beggar. Then without hesitation, he told Xenos he was out of the group. He called him dead weight and claimed the party would be better off without him. Xenos knew better. Deep down, he was the glue holding this reckless team together, but Aston didn't care. The truth was, Xenos had only been recruited to act as a disposable meat shield, someone nobody would cry over if he died on the battlefield. Now that the party had grown powerful, Aston believed they didn't need Xenos anymore. Xenos tried to make him see reason, pointing out that the only reason they made it this far was because he was always there to patch them up after Aston's dumb decisions. But Aston shut him down, mocking his rough, unlicensed healing magic and saying any half-decent healer could replace him. Elsewhere, tucked in the shadows of a grimy alleyway, a pair of slave dealers were in the middle of trying to subdue an elf girl. The awful woman reminded the ugly guy to be gentle since elves were incredibly rare and worth more if they were unbruised. The guy already had her pinned, but Lily, despite everything, wasn't going down easy. She slammed her foot to his gold balls, and while he was doubled over in pain, she bolted. She almost made it too, but the man grabbed his bow and shot an arrow straight into her ankle. Lily crashed to the ground, unable to run, and the bastard caught up quickly. He tried to pin her again, but she chomped down on his hand like a rabid dog, forcing him to stab her just to break free. That's when Xenos walked into the alley and spotted the scene. Lily bleeding on the ground, barely conscious. He looked at the two bastards and asked if they were the ones responsible. They didn't even try to deny it. They told him to piss off, reminding him that slavery was perfectly legal around here. Lily was their property, and they could do whatever they wanted with her. Xenos understands the situation. They were technically right by the law, so his hands were tied, but then he thought of something. He reached into his pocket, pulled out the very gold coin Aston threw at him, and offered to buy Lily. It's not nearly enough to buy an elf, not even a wounded one. But the traders take one look at Lily, bleeding out and probably minutes from death, and decide it's not worth dragging a corpse to market, so they took the money and left without another word. Once those scumbags are gone, Xenos walks over to Lily, checking if she's still hanging on. She's already made peace with the idea of dying in some random alley, so she tells him to just leave her there and save himself the trouble. But Xenos calmly tells her she's not dying today. Lily glances down at her wounds and blinks in disbelief because her wounds are already completely closed up, not even a scar left behind. She looks at him stunned and quietly thanks him, apologizing for making him spend his gold coin just to save her, but Xenos brushes it off. He didn't even want to keep that coin anyway, just holding it reminded him of Aston, and he'd rather forget that asshole existed. He asks Lily if she's got anywhere she can go, but she doesn't. I mean, she was a slave 2 minutes ago, so she doesn't exactly have a house or wallet waiting for her. She also admits she's starving, so Xenos offers to get her something to eat and maybe find her some decent clothes along the way. He ends up taking her to a small diner nearby, grabbing her a fresh outfit before they come in. Lily is all smiles as she chows down, clearly loving every bite of her first real meal in who knows how long. But after a while, she notices that Xenos hasn't ordered anything for himself, so she asks why, and he tells her he's just not hungry. But truth is, he's flat broke. He spent everything he had on her food and clothes, and since he got kicked out of Golden Phoenix, he's gonna need to figure something out fast before he ends up starving in the streets. As they're sitting there, a guy stumbles through the door. His arm's a mess, burned and bleeding, clearly injured, and from the looks of it, he's been in some trouble and barely made it out. Xenos watches him quietly analyzing the damage. Judging by the hole in the arm and the scorched edges, it looks like the guy caught a hit from a magic gun. Fortunately, he's a lizard man and their bodies regenerate pretty well on their own, but even so, the injury's deep. If left untreated, it could take days to close up, and he'd be in constant pain the whole time. So Xenos lifts his hand and casts a healing spell, and after a few seconds, the wound seals up like it was never there. The man freezes, looks down at his good-as-new arm, and turns to Xenos with wide eyes, asking who the hell he is. Before Xenos can even speak, Lily jumps in and proudly declares that he's a legendary healer. The guy's never heard of him, but he's clearly impressed and grateful, so he really doesn't care. He then gives a few coins to Xenos as a way of thanks and promises to spread the word about Xenos. At first, Xenos doesn't get why the guy just handed him money. Then it hits him. Healers usually charge for their services. That spark ignites something in his brain and he starts thinking. If he plays this right, he could start a new life as a full-time healer. But there's a problem. Since he's from the slums, getting an official healing license isn't exactly on the table. And if he opens a legit business, he'll have to deal with taxes, permits, inspections, all the red tape. And like a wise man once said, tax evasion isn't a crime, it's an act of survival. So yeah, Xenos is going off the grid. He's gonna run his clinic underground, healer for hire, no questions asked. Lily doesn't really get everything Xenos is saying, but if he's serious about setting up a clinic, she wants in. Xenos pauses, thinking it over. Running an underground clinic without a permit isn't exactly legal, and dragging a kid into something like that doesn't sit right with him. But Lily reminds him that he technically bought her, so by the rules of this twisted world, that makes him her master now, which means she's sticking by his side, no matter how many rules get bent or broken. Xenos didn't buy her to own her, he just didn't want her bleeding out in some alley. But Lily hits him with the harsh truth. She's got nowhere else to go, and if he leaves her behind, she'll probably get scooped up and sold again, so that'd be on him. Eventually, Xenos sighs and gives in and tells her she can tag along, and Lily immediately pledges to serve him with her whole body, which makes Xenos nearly choke and ask her to not make it sound so creepy. Anyway, first things first, if Xenos is going to set up shop, he's got to find a roof to sleep under. So he takes Lily to one of the sketchiest, most forgotten parts of the city. The place looks abandoned and borderline cursed, but that's exactly what he's looking for. Lily glances around nervously and asks why they're even here. Xenos explains that if he's running a shady back alley clinic, the last thing he needs is the Royal Association breathing down his neck. A place like this is quiet, off the radar, and best of all, it's free. Lily can't really argue with the logic, but she's clearly spooked. She points out that abandoned districts like this are notorious for being infested with monsters, especially the creepy kind. They finally stumble across a house that's somehow still standing, and Xenos thinks he's hit the jackpot. But the second Lily sees it, she freezes because it looks like something straight out of a horror novel. Classic haunted house vibes. If they're unlucky, they might even attract a wraith. Xenos raises an eyebrow, unfamiliar with the term. Lily explains that wraiths are ghost-type monsters who can literally turn someone into a spirit with just a single touch. They step inside and it's pitch black, so Lily offers to light the place up with a basic spell. That catches Xenos off guard because he didn't know she could use magic. But Lily shrugs it off, saying it's just simple stuff. Once the room lights up, they finally get a good look around, and it's honestly as bad as Lily feared. Dust, cobwebs, cracked walls, it's a total fixer-upper. But Xenos is oddly upbeat. The place might look cursed, but the roof doesn't leak and the structure's solid, so in his eyes, that's more than enough to start his new work. But just when they think they found the perfect spot, a big problem shows up and turns out the house already has a tenant. And not just any tenant, but an actual wraith who floats out of the shadows and tells Xenos she's going to drain the life right out of him. Lily starts panicking immediately, while Xenos just lets out a sigh, clearly annoyed that the place wasn't as empty as it looked. Carmilla then lunges at Xenos without hesitation, but he shuts her down instantly with a burst of healing magic that blasts both her arms clean off. He doesn't even flinch because compared to the horrors he faced in the labyrinths while rolling with Golden Phoenix, Carmilla is just another Tuesday. Back then, whenever Asin got pissy, he tossed Xenos into the dungeon solo, and he ran into wraiths all the time, so he's taken down dozens, maybe even over 100 by now. Stay healing spells aren't just for fixing wounds, they're especially nasty against undead creatures. Xenos then casually apologizes to Carmilla for trespassing, saying he didn't realize someone already lived here, but the housing options are non-existent around here, so he politely asks if she'd be okay with him staying. Carmilla's offended by the sheer audacity. She's the queen of wraiths and some random squatter is asking if he can crash at her place. So she snaps her ghostly fingers and summons a whole crew of angry spirits to chase him out. Xenos sighs again, then hits them all with a mass heal spell that erases them like chalk off a blackboard. Now Carmilla's the one panicking. She seriously underestimated this guy and she's halfway convinced he could just exorcise her out of existence if he wanted to. But Xenos explains that he's not here to fight, he just needs a place to live and treat patients. He offers a compromise. Let him and Lily have the first floor, and they won't bother her upstairs. Carmilla knows she's outmatched, so she agrees to let him and Lily have the first floor, but she claims the second floor as her territory. Xenos is happy with the deal, but Lily is stuck trying to figure out which one of them is more terrifying, Carmilla the Ghost Queen or Xenos the healer who casually obliterates spirits. By the time morning rolls around, Lily's getting restless. With no patients yet, she offers to go outside and spread the word about their new clinic, but Xenos quickly shuts that down. If they start advertising out in the open, the Royal Hospital might catch wind of what they're doing, and that would be bad news. He tells her to be patient, and someone's bound to show up soon. And right on cue, the front door creaks open and their first customer steps inside. Lily jumps up to welcome them, only to realize it's the same guy Xenos patched up the day before. Xenos figured he'd return eventually because anyone getting blasted by a magic gun usually isn't walking the clean and lawful path, and people like that tend to avoid legit hospitals for obvious reasons. The lizard man introduces himself as Zond and says he needs Xenos to check on his sister. Xenos says he'll take a look, so Zofia rolls up her sleeve and shows him a shallow wound on her arm. She says the injury's been acting weird since yesterday, and the moment Xenos inspects it, he realizes she's been hit with some kind of magic-based poison. Zofia asks if there's anything he can do to fix it, but since the wound's been left untreated all night, the tissue in her arm is basically toast. Xenos tells her the safest option is to cut the whole arm off before the poison spreads any further. Zofia is not thrilled to hear that, but she takes it like a champ. She asks how much it'll cost to have the procedure done. Xenos tells her the price is a flat 1 million yen. Zond flicks out the second he hears that furious that Xenos would charge that much for just chopping an arm off. He's ready to throw down, but Zofia tells him to chill and decides to negotiate instead. She tries to pull rank, asking if Xenos really wants to overcharge someone like her, Zofia the Tornado. She runs one of the 3 major gangs in the area, and Xenos knows exactly who she is. Even so, he's not backing down. He doesn't do charity work, especially not when regeneration magic is involved. That catches Zofia off guard because she's never heard of any healer who could regenerate a whole limb. Xenos is just as confused since he assumed limb regeneration was basic stuff. He taught himself healing magic, so he never really figured out what's considered normal. But that's beside the point, and he asks Zofia if she wants to proceed. Zofia gives him the green light, so he has her lie down and gets prepped for the operation. He conjures a magic scalpel, essentially a blade made entirely of condensed energy. Zofia is a little concerned because she's never seen anything like that before, but Xenos reassures her. It's razor sharp, completely sterile, and ideal for surgery. And again, he's surprised other healers don't use it. He gets to work numbing the area with a steady stream of healing magic. Once it's dulled enough, he slices off the infected part and shifts his focus to growing a new arm. His hands glow brighter as he ramps up the spell's intensity, rebuilding the entire limb one layer at a time from bone to skin. Zofia stares at her freshly regenerated arm in disbelief. She flexes her fingers and is stunned it feels completely natural. She admits Xenos definitely earned his asking price, and as a bonus, she offers to send any injured members of her crew his way from now on. And Xenos has no objections, as long as they're paying like everybody else. In the days that follow, Xenos starts getting flooded with patients from the Lizardman faction, and seeing how tired he looks, Lily decides to make him some tea to help him relax. Xenos thanks her for being thoughtful, but he notices that she brought 3 cups instead of 2, so Lily explains that the third one is for Carmilla. Xenos doubts she'd be interested in joining them downstairs, but to his surprise, Carmilla actually has a soft spot for tea. While sipping in relative peace, Lily asked Xenos if he had any clue why the lizardman kept ending up in such rough shape. Based on the injuries he's treated, Xenos figures there's some kind of turf war going on between rival groups. And right on cue, the front door gets kicked in. A pack of werewolves storms into the clinic, and their leader, Linga, wastes no time announcing that she's here to kill Xenos. She's been clashing with the lizardmen for days, but no matter how many of them she wounds, they keep bouncing back. So now she wants to cut off their recovery at the source. Xenos calmly tells her that he doesn't work for any faction and would prefer not to turn his clinic into a battlefield. But Linga doesn't care, and she already gave the command to attack. Her crew rushes in, but thanks to Xenos' defensive magic, nothing they throw at him even leaves a scratch, so it's like their attacks bounced off him like pebbles hitting a brick wall. Realizing she can't hurt him directly, Linga decides to trash the clinic instead, but it's a damn bad move, because this place isn't just Xenos' clinic, it's also Carmilla's house. And if there's one thing Carmilla won't tolerate, it's people messing with her home. The second the werewolves catch sight of Carmilla, every ounce of bravado drains from their face because no one in their right mind wants to fight a wraith, let alone the Queen of Wraiths. Carmilla was seconds away from turning them all into spirit dust, but Xenos stepped in. He asked her to spare them. After all, this was still a clinic, not an execution site, and as long as they cleaned up the damage they caused, he was willing to let it slide. Carmilla gave them a death glare, but eventually agreed and floated back upstairs. Seeing how even the Queen of the Wraith obeyed Xenos, Linga's entire tone flipped. She dropped to her knees, begging for forgiveness, promising to repair the damage and keep her people in check. The very next day, an orc shows up at the door with a message. Lu, the leader of the orc faction, wants to meet with Xenos personally. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to not miss the next part. Xenos figured this was bound to happen sooner or later, considering he'd already dealt with 2 of the slum bosses. Lu was the big shot running things among the orcs and ogres, and she'd made a fortune mining magic stones with her raw strength alone. Dealing with her wasn't exactly ideal, but on the bright side, once he sorted things out with her, nobody would dare mess with his clinic again, so might as well get it over with now. Before heading out though, he paused to ask the orc if Lu was reasonable enough to actually talk things out. The orc assured him Lu was the wisest, most dignified person he'd ever meet, which sounded promising. But it made Xenos wonder why Lu didn't just come herself. When he asked, the orc explained that she couldn't actually move right now. That definitely didn't sound good, so Xenos wasted no more time and followed him straight to Lu. They ended up inside a cave where Xenos was finally introduced to Lu. She greeted him warmly enough, but before he got started, Xenos asked her how she even found out about him in the first place. Lu casually mentioned that the lizardmen and werewolves couldn't stop running their mouths about some top-secret healer they weren't supposed to mention to anyone. Clearly, his days as an underground healer weren't lasting long at this rate, but he'd worry about that later. Lu even heard Xenos could heal any injury for the right price, and she wanted to see for herself if he really lived up to the hype. He walked over and raised his hand towards her, prompting Lu to ask what exactly he was doing. Xenos explained he couldn't see any obvious external injuries, so he was scanning her insides to check for internal damage. She seemed pretty surprised, since most healers apparently didn't know how to do that, but Xenos figured it should have been standard practice. After all, how the hell else could anyone treat a patient properly? Once Xenos completed his scan, he quickly noticed something off. There was a lump deep in her stomach radiating mana, which suggested it was probably a mana stone. Lu confirmed his guess and explained this wasn't just any stone, it was enchanted with explosion magic. So if she tried to move even slightly, the whole thing might blow up. Xenos immediately thought someone must have tried to assassinate her by sneaking it into her food or something, but Lu clarified it wasn't anything sinister like that. In fact, she'd simply gotten really hungry, saw something that looked like a rice ball, and ended up swallowing the freaking stone by accident. She even insisted it was an honest mistake that anyone could have made. Xenos definitely doubted that, but he wasn't too worried either way. After all, mana stones usually found their own way out eventually. Xenos started heading out, but Lu stopped him, saying things weren't that simple. Because when she'd eaten that damn mana stone, she accidentally chewed it up, meaning there wasn't much time left before it blew. Lu had already made peace with dying because of her dumb mistake, but she couldn't bear the thought of her men refusing to abandon her. Xenos then asked what she expected him to do about it, and Lu explained she just wanted him there so she could leave all her wealth to him. Because if she exploded, the empire she built would collapse, and she'd rather have her fortune go to someone decent than let it fall into the wrong hands. Apparently, while researching Xenos, she found out he charged high prices for healing, but never took money for treating kids, which made her convinced he was a genuinely good guy. Lu then tossed him a key, explaining it would give him access to her treasure vault after her death, but Xenos never agreed to let her die in the first place. And considering she hadn't blown up yet, he knew she must have eaten the stone recently enough to save her. Without a second thought, he summoned his magic scalpel and moved right toward her. Lu's men initially panicked and tried stopping him, but before they could intervene, Xenos had already made his move. In just a few seconds, he'd sliced open Lu's stomach, pulled out the explosive mana stone, and healed her wound without a hitch. Everyone was speechless as he calmly showed them the dangerous stone in his hand. But the stone was still primed to explode, so to keep everyone safe, Xenos wrapped his hands tightly around it, containing the blast. The explosion could have easily wiped out the entire cave, but he shielded his hands with defensive magic beforehand, so despite the pain, he was fine. Afterwards, Xenos handed Lu back her key, telling her there was no need to donate her fortune anymore. Lu couldn't quite believe that he'd actually chosen to save her instead of grabbing the cash, but Xenos shrugged it off, saying he only charged a fair price for healing, so taking an entire fortune would have been excessive. At that moment, Lu decided she genuinely likes Xenos, promising him that if he ever needed anything, he just had to ask, and she'd do whatever she could to help him. She even offered to deploy her warriors as guards around his clinic, but Xenos politely declined because having orc soldiers on his doorstep would attract too much attention. A few days passed and Lily was sitting by the clinic's front desk, sulking because Zofia, Linga, and Lu had been coming by a lot more than usual. Xenos noticed that too because those three had been showing up regularly, but none of them seemed injured. He started wondering why they even bothered visiting, and at first he thought they were probably just bored, but Carmilla quickly corrected him, explaining that those women were clearly in love with him. Xenos couldn't wrap his head around that idea because in his eyes he was just an ordinary underground healer and nothing special, but Carmilla was confident she knew what she was talking about. Lily became worried at the idea that one of those girls might start dating Xenos and take all his attention away, but Xenos assured her he'd never date any of them. Not to be mean or anything, but he thought they were all kind of crazy weird. Still, Carmilla warned it was only a matter of time before those three started a war to decide who got to claim Xenos. He thought things would never escalate that far, but as fate would have it, the very next day Zofia came into the clinic with a basket of fruit, casually mentioning she planned to declare war on the other factions for reasons she conveniently refused to explain. Right after her, Linga and Lu showed up as well, each bringing their own gifts and also talking about starting a war against the others. Xenos protested loudly, trying to get them to reconsider, but they flat out refused to listen. Carmilla found the entire situation hilarious, joking that many people were about to die due to Xenos' apparent womanizing tendencies. Xenos didn't appreciate the way she put it, but there was no denying he had a major problem on his hands. The deathmatch was already scheduled to begin at noon, and Xenos couldn't just sit back and let them kill each other over something this silly, so he had to take action. After a while at the stadium, Zofia, Linga, and Lu had already gathered their respective armies, fully prepared for an all-out brawl. The atmosphere was tense, and just as the battle was about to kick off, Xenos suddenly appeared, causing everyone to stop and look in his direction. The three girls watched him closely, waiting to see what he'd say, but Xenos surprised everyone by calmly stating he wasn't there to stop them. He acknowledged their long-standing grudges against each other and figured it was better to let them fight it out until they were satisfied instead of trying to force a peace they didn't want. With Xenos' blessing, the girls all agreed they would fight with everything they had, and as an added incentive, whoever survived the fight would get to claim Xenos' virginity. Xenos didn't recall agreeing to that damn part, but before he could object or clarify anything, the battle had already started. Zofia was the first to make a move, lunging forward with her daggers aiming straight for Linga's neck, but Linga quickly dodged the attack, backflipping to safety. In that instant, Lu jumped into action, trying to flatten Zofia with a flying dropkick. But Zofia saw it coming just in time, sidestepping the attack, which resulted in Lu accidentally smashing into some poor background characters instead, as if she were bowling. Zofia and Linga fought again, their weapons locked as they struggled to overpower each other. Just as they were about to land decisive blows, Lu returned to the fray, leaping down from above and nearly crushing both of them beneath her massive attack. Zofia stumbled into the orc section of the stadium, prompting her to fight her way out, and soon everyone else followed suit, turning on each other's factions and triggering complete chaos. The scene quickly became brutal, people slashing, cutting, and throwing punches left and right. Yet, astonishingly, even after 6 relentless hours of battle, not a single combatant had fallen. It was at that moment Zofia suddenly noticed something strange. The wounds on her arms were healing themselves right before her eyes. Everyone paused, bewildered, until Xenos finally spoke up and explained he was responsible. He told them plainly that he agreed to let them have their little death battle, but he never once said he'd let anyone actually die. After all, they were still his patients, and he wasn't going to let any shit happen to them. Safia felt silly for not realizing Xeno's involvement sooner, but none of them had ever imagined a healer could heal so many people simultaneously, let alone continuously over 6 hours straight. The girls finally understood the point Xenos had been trying to make. Their fight would literally never end as long as he was there to keep healing them. If they couldn't find a way to get along, they'd be stuck in an endless cycle of pointless conflict, and just to be clear, he reminded them he planned on billing each of them for every hour he'd spent healing. Realizing how foolish they had been, the three girls finally agreed to set their differences aside. So they promised to maintain peace among their factions, but as far as fighting over Xenos went, they were still determined. Only this time, they agreed they'd compete peacefully without any damn bloodshed. Meanwhile, Lily approached Xenos, curious as to why the hell he'd gone through all the trouble of intervening in the battle. Xenos paused for a moment, remembering something his old teacher once told him. A healer who could only mend wounds was third-rate. A second-rate healer could restore the entire body, but a first-rate healer was someone who could make the world a better place. Xenos admitted he wasn't sure if he had it in him to be a first-rate healer, but that didn't mean he wouldn't try. He wanted to improve life in these slums somehow, and besides, he joked that if everyone died, he'd run out of patience. Lily smiled softly to herself, knowing full well that Xenos' tough talk was just his way of covering up how much he truly cared. After all, if the demi-humans stopped fighting, he'd actually have fewer patients coming in, which meant less money for him. Yet he still chose peace over profit, and this genuine kindness was exactly why Lily liked him so much, and she told him as much directly. Of course, her words went straight over Xenos' head, leaving him slightly confused. In any case, it was getting late, and Xenos decided it was time to go collect payment and head back home. Lily was a bit taken aback. She had thought Xenos was joking earlier when he said he'd charge them for all the healing during their battle, but apparently he was completely serious. Healing an entire stadium full of people was exhausting work, and there was no way he'd let something like that slide without compensation. At the same time, over in the capital, the commander of the Royal Knights was meeting privately with the Vice Commander Krishna. Noticing the commander's troubled expression, Krishna asked if something had happened. He explained he'd heard a strange rumor. Apparently the long-standing war among the demi-human factions in the slums had abruptly come to an end. Krishna found this difficult to believe. Those factions had been locked in a bloody feud for years, so it seemed impossible they'd suddenly decided to play nice. The commander agreed it sounded unlikely, but if true, this was potentially a serious problem. The kingdom had been stable for centuries precisely because the impoverished, disenfranchised people were always too busy fighting among themselves to cause trouble for the nobility. So if these factions found peace and united, they could demand changes, perhaps even outrageous stuff like rights, equality, and maybe even free healthcare. And that shit would be a big problem. Rumor had it that a single individual was responsible for mediating peace between these factions. Determined to eliminate this threat, the commander tasked Krishna with dealing with him. Krishna accepted the assignment without hesitation, promising she would track down this troublemaker and arrest him for the crime of disturbing the war by bringing the damn peace. Meanwhile, back at Xenos' clinic, Xenos sneezed suddenly, which made everyone around him worry that he might have caught a cold. Linga immediately offered her fluffy tail as a blanket, while Lou enthusiastically invited him to warm up by burying his face between her legendary black cushion. And that shit makes Lily so devastated because she didn't have either of them. Xenos then insisted it was nothing more than a regular sneeze, reminding them all that he still needed to heal Zofia, so they should probably quiet down until he finished his work. After carefully healing Zofia's injured arm, Xenos asked her how the hell exactly she'd managed to hurt herself, since it had been a long time since he'd needed to patch her up. Zofia admitted she'd gotten hurt on the job last night. Her usual work involved stealing from corrupt nobles and redistributing the wealth to the poor like the legendary Robin Hood, but this time she was caught sneaking into the wrong aristocrat's home. She had encountered Krishna, the vice commander of the Royal Knights, a ruthless woman known for shooting first and asking questions later, typically with her magic fire guns. Hearing this, Carmilla began to worry that catching Krishna's attention might spell trouble for Xenos. But Xenos wasn't particularly concerned. After all, he figured there was no reason for someone as high-ranking as Krishna to care about a low-profile, underground healer like himself. Elsewhere in the slums, Krishna was already prowling around, gathering information on Xenos. She noticed the demi-humans coexisting peacefully, which made her suspicious, so she approached a lizard man and asked bluntly who was responsible for ending the demi-human war. The lizard man didn't recognize Krishna, but he was fully aware Xenos wanted to keep his identity hidden, so he refused to say anything and tries to walk away, but Krishna wasn't having it and drew her gun, threatening to shoot his precious stick if he didn't talk. However, the lizardman didn't budge. He was ready to take a bullet if it meant protecting Xenos. Just then, Zafia and her brother happened to pass by. Seeing them approach, Krishna realized she wasn't prepared to deal with Zafia right then, so she quickly slipped away into the abandoned section of the city. Wandering aimlessly, she stumbled upon Xeno's clinic by sheer luck and decided to go inside to ask for directions back to the main city. Xenos kindly offered to show her the way, but right as he was about to help her out, Lily walked into the room with some tea. The moment Krishna caught sight of Lily's elf ears, her expression darkened instantly, and without warning, she drew her magic fire gun and fired a blast directly at Xeno's head. Wraps up episode 3. Subscribe if you don't want to miss what's next.